It's Sunday and it's raining, but who cares? You're doing your gardening on your allotment. Today's jobs have been, as you can see, this lovely stuff here, which is comfrey. Now the neat stuff comes out like that that's been left over winter. The worst of the smell's gone out of it. Basically, I decant some liquid off into here. I don't use it neat. I half fill my watering can, as you can see there. And the idea is I can then go around, if I just spin you around, to the soft fruit. And here we have gooseberries and red currants, of course. Now, what I have noticed is you have to watch out this time of year for this thing. See on the top of these leaves here, right? That's similar to pear rust. So I pick all of these leaves off and I put them in a bag and take them home. That means that because we've had unseasonably damp weather in the UK, despite me pruning these better than I ever have, lack of airflow causes this. So watch out, gardeners, because this rust is about. Take it out. Once diluted, the comfrey tea can then be poured as a general liquid fertiliser around the roots here of my soft fruits, okay? Because they do need a good feed here in springtime. I've planted my pear trees close together so that it minimises whatever pollination I've got to do with my little trusty paintbrush myself, okay? Using a different watercolour brush for each particular species of fruit tree, this one here is a nice little artist watercolour brush. You can basically dust off pollen from the flowers once the male part of the plant is ready and spread the pollen from one tree to another. So for instance, I've got a pear tree here and another pear tree just here. That's a Dwyanda camise. Providing they are pollinating partners, you can just look them up. If they're one number either side, they're a good pollinating partner, or the same number. Better to have a different number, but close. You can spread your pollen around, and therefore, if there aren't enough pollinators, you've got your tree sorted. This pear tree has been fully sprayed over winter using milk, bicarb, water and a bit of detergent, and that helps to get rid of the worst excesses of things like canker. And it's looking much more healthy than it did last year, so I'm hoping for a good crop. Just put a bit of bone meal down the bottom there, just to help the roots a bit and to help with some food essential for making fruit. This is my one of my Saar plum trees, and already by mid-April you can see that the blossom is about to burst. So looking forward to a decent harvest. So trying to keep it open on the pruning, and again put some bloodfish and bone on the bottom here for fertiliser. This patch of my allotment which borders a neighbour is given over to comfrey, and every now and again I dig it up for the tap roots and I make the comfrey tea from that as my fertiliser. I just went with the flow on the comfrey because it did creep across from my neighbour's plot from a previous neighbour. So once I worked out what it was, I just went with it, and I've used it ever since. Always nice to have some herbs on your heavy clay soil if you've got it. Sorrel works well, and yarrow. Both have good culinary uses. The comfrey which I've dug up, I've put into these pots. It'll rot. I'll then fill it with water with a lid to make them comfrey tea. Last year I tried growing various culinary herbs in pots, and it doesn't work. What I discovered was every single pot that I left on my plot was used by the ants to make an ant's nest. So this year I've dug all the ones which I think are still alive. For instance, this one here, which are like a celery leaf, and basically dug them into the ground. Better than letting the ants have it. I don't grow many flowers, but this camellia is quite pretty. And next to it I have a damson, and I grew this one from seed. Basically, you've got the seed from a stone. I'd overwintered it in the freezer, and looking forward. And another damson behind it as well, which I got from growing from fruit. So you can grow them from the stone. They won't grow true to the parent, but I wanted to see if you could, and this is now their third or fourth year actually this year that they've been. So from that, it's about 3 feet high. This other one's a lower growing damson, so it's about, at its most, 2 feet high. Other herbs have survived, for instance this hyssop, lovage, that survived, and angelica. This was much used by our ancestors, our Victorian ancestors in fact, here in the UK, and it was used in sweets, to make sweets, I think sugared. One of my strawberry beds, I've removed all of the runners. I've put the runners into a little bucket at home because I'm going to replant them elsewhere, catch them while they're still alive. Dug around it and I've added some blood, fish and bone dug in around it. So basically I'm just going with the heavy clay on this one. I had put some gypsum on this over winter and just breaking it up now around the old roots, trying to get rid of the runners underground, so I've just got parent plant. This year I've lifted all of my strawberry runners and basically I've kept them alive in this little pot over the weekend with a bit of plant food in. Basically my trusty pair of scissors to trim off all the dead bits, potting them temporarily because the allotment's flooded on one side, and I'll just give them a little bit of liquid feed using a little pipette there. So that saves the problems, and I'll probably put them in another area once it dries out in the clay soil. They do very well in clay. All in all I've got about 50 of these runners from a strawberry bed. Probably only about 30 will make it back on the allotment, but that's 30 I wouldn't have had, and now's the time to lift up your runners now because they won't live, because basically they're just sort of an extension. Some of them are actually dangling in air with the roots, so now's the time to grab them, pop them out and find another home for them, or if you're lucky, pop them out straight away once you've found them. Just use a pair of scissors to cut off any dead bits. Last year's onions are still doing okay, so I've got the remainder of them in these containers here, as you can see, and they've kept us going well. Stir-ons and of course Stuttgarter. Stuttgarter tends to do better for me. Rhubarbs are doing well. They've had some gypsum put on around them and a bit of Epsom salts as well, because they're a little bit yellow. They add a bit more magnesium. And the last thing I've got, well, there's my little shelter there. The 2 composting bins, massive composting bins, have been working overdrive. So basically I've put old worn out beetroots from the plots that I haven't taken home, the chopped up woods from the soft fruits like the gooseberries and black currants, etc., and red currants, and any weeds have gone into there, so yum yum yum, all chomped up in my 2 composters. Tesco were getting rid of the last of their fruit trees, so this one was a mystery, had no label on it, but it was £2.75. So I got this one and a couple of apple trees. I think it might actually be a plum tree. When I pruned the dead twigs at the top, it still looks like it's alive, but only just. Soft fruits like tayberries have been staked out, let the air grow around them, and similarly others against the fence of my neighbour as well. And this is the last year I'm going to try the gojies down the allotment. I've only had about 20 or 30 flowers and 2 berries so far, so I thought if they don't work this year I'll take them home and grow them in pots. The raspberry canes have been thinned out, ready now just for the twine. I'll just put some twine along here with some bamboo stakes, and basically their progeny, as you can see, they are fantastic at reproducing themselves. Raspberry, no worries there. The progeny are starting to be along this line here of the allotment here, where I put this rubble netting up, triple layered rubble netting with chicken wire at the back. You've seen my previous vids. Halfway along towards my Robinson Crusoe shack at the bottom, I've decided to put some filberts and Kentish cob. There's one right at the back of the plot, but you need more than one variety of the native nuts that came from the UK. So I'll go for Kentish cob and filberts, and I'll put them in this year because I've got lots of baby ones in my front garden. For those of you thinking of getting filbert trees, i.e. the British native hazelnuts, this is the male part of the tree which is there. That's the catkins, and they're wind pollinated, okay? And the female part of the tree is the little flowers carried on the end of the branches. So if you want to grow hazelnuts in Britain, this one here I've let it overgrow, but it's a native British tree. For anyone who wants to put blackberries on their allotments, I know a lot of you think that's just hedgerow. I would have a go if you've got heavy clay soils. Make sure you put lots of young cuttings in. Don't let it go too woody. You can get the older ones out, but just keep taking little cuttings. It's the young growth that produces the fruit on that year. So hopefully I'll get some berries off this lot here. Vicious thorns, but nice berries. First set of blossom coming on the Ulan gauge, the French gauge plum. To prevent the frost, I've put some black sheets along this aluminium border here to stop it producing a frost pocket as it has in previous years, and also sprayed them and planted loads of garlic around, so hopefully the blossom rot won't come this year. A massive pruning job as well. A couple of odd success stories down here on the heavy clay soils would be, and I'd recommend these. You've got barberry, berberis. See those yellow buds there? They'll flower, and beautiful red leaves as well, still left from the winter time. And some at the back there. That'll then give way to flowers, and then you'll have these blue-black edible berries. We have to cook them. Jams and jellies, I believe. Another success story is eucalyptus. A fantastic eucalyptus for making your own little ingredients if you want to make your vapor for vaporizing machines. I've got one. Or you can just make your own insecticide from it. I soak it in water, and it's a fantastic, if you've got it infested with ants, you can use it as your own little homemade insecticide. Well, it gets rid of them basically. Right, here's a basic guide to pollination using an artist's watercolour brush. You need to use a different one for each different species. So if I'm doing plum trees, I'll just use one for doing plum trees. Now, if you look at the basic anatomy of the flower, here we have a fruit tree flower. This one is a plum. Okay, now within the flower you'll find there's lots of stalks. The one in the centre that sticks out the most, they don't always do that. If you look at the side angle here, the female part, and that's got a sticky top to it. It's called the stigma. Then there's a tube that goes down, that's called the style, that leads to the ovary where fertilisation takes place. Now, you're after the pollen. When bumblebees or pollinators land on it, what happens thereafter? The nectar, okay, which is the sweet sugary stuff which the flowers make. But while they're there, they brush. See those little tiny buds, those dots sticking up? That's what the male part, the pollen. And at the end of there, you've got this long tube that sticks up, and that the anther, the top of that, is where the pollen is. You want to be brushing the pollen off onto your little watercolour brush, then take it to another plum tree, and you need to brush the pollen across the female part, which is the bit that sticks up the most in the middle, as you can see there. Try and zoom on it there. So you're brushing it across the flowers, and you can do hundreds in a minute, right? So if you've only got dwarf rootstock, within a couple of hours you can be cross-pollinated yourself. So this is my watercolour brush. So if I was doing this particular flower here, I'd be going for these the little yellow stalks at the tops, and that's the male pollen. Okay, and you just brush on the outside. So you can brush all around the flower. You know, brush quite vigorously to pick up the pollen. It's not ready yet, okay, but you'll know because you'll dust off and you'll see tiny bits of pollen, tiny little yellow bits of pollen, and then you take it to another plum tree, and then you just brush it. The technique is to brush it across. You're going to have to touch each flower, brush it lightly across. Only one pollen grain, which is the male gamete, needs to enter that. Then that will travel down the tube, the style, into the ovary and fertilise the female part of the flower. Okay, so and then that develops into fruit. And most fruit that you do eat is actually an enlarged ovary, believe it or not. So there you go. If you're worried about frost, which is around when your blossoms are out, you can always put some fleece on. To show you, you can buy basic fleece here, plant protection fleece, protecting against frost, heavy rain and cold winds, keeps your pests, your insects out, lightweight and strong. It's 5 metres by 1.5 metres. If you take your average dwarf rootstock tree, this one here is my plum tree, it's no higher than 8 feet. I could use 2 or 3 of them. You're supposed to take it off when the frost is gone. Well, that's it for now. Thank you for watching, and don't forget, very soon there will be the prize drawer for the 2 hats, and I'm wearing one homemade hat myself. Of course, this isn't in the drawer, it's one that was made just for me. Thank you for watching. Bye for now. Happy gardening.